Well, hello. It's us again.
Yes, and hello. It certainly is us again.
And we're live, folks, again. And this is your chance to ask me and Jane questions about all things paranormal and all things spiritual and all things psychic. Most of the stuff, we like to take questions that are kind of thought-provoking, if we can. So when you sort of add your questions, anything thought-provoking, please don't just keep bombarding us to make predictions, if you don't mind, as well, because we tend to do the predictions. We'll talk about some of the topical issues, of course, but we tend to make our main predictions on our channels. Jane's got a channel, I've got a channel, this is my channel you're on at the moment, but we also got Jane's channel, all in the description below, folks. And we'll say a few hellos first to you all, and then we'll move on and take some of your questions. So have a think, anything interesting or topical that you'd like to talk about.
Well, first of all, Craig, we have Agility Bits. Hello, Jane and Craig from lovely sunny Cornwall.
She always says it's sunny down there. We'll have to move down to Cornwall. I'm sure it's lovely. Hi from Australia, 4 a.m. in the morning,
Good
Kay
grief.
says. You must be bonkers, Kay, getting up at this time of day to watch me and Jane. But it's nice, it's nice. Thank you very much for your dedication to the show.
Blanche, hello from Florida. Hi, Blanche. June, hello. I think we're saying it's from a duck.
Quack, quack. Yeah. Dune comes on, brings the whole flock.
All right. Patrice, hello again. Many greetings from Germany, Craig.
Patricia Saltz, yes, we know Patricia very well. Thanks for being one of our regulars. I love animals. Hello, guys from Cheshire. I notice a lot of the patrons have been coming on. Those of you that don't know about the patrons, have a look in the description below. You can talk to us privately on the Patreon channel.
And Ireland says, hello, Jane and Craig. Hi, Ireland.
So while we're saying our hellos, have a think about questions you'd like to ask us. Put some thoughtful questions.
We won't be doing predictions.
No, we're keeping away from doing too many predictions. We talk about some topical stuff, but predictions are on the main show, like I say. Hi, Craig and Jane. Are you doing anything interesting for Halloween?
We certainly are, Craig.
It's interesting how people... We were saying on the way over how we're talking the car on the way over, and on the way over we're saying, let's do a Halloween special, shall we? Let's instead of me and Jane on the chairs, we'll use the seance room section of the set here. We thought, let's do a Halloween special, and there we go. We said, I bet we get some synchronizations.
Yeah.
If we talk about this topic, people will ask us. So there we go. First question up. So yes, we're going to do it. We'll probably do it on the Friday rather than on the Monday, which is the Halloween, just so that it kind of, this is everybody's doing Halloween special. So we thought we'd do ours on the Friday, but Halloween style. Fascinating. I wonder if we're getting some of the other questions, things we were talking about in the car. It'd be interesting if they come up. Yeah. We were talking about synchronicity and those things, and it does synchronize. Dodie, hi, do you believe that we can reach ascension while living this life and being given a choice to work for mankind? I'm from Cheshire. Well, I don't think being from Cheshire, Dodie, makes a lot of difference. Ascension. Now, depends what you mean, Dodie, by ascension. That's a kind of a religiously sort of word. I think what you mean, if you mean, can we reach kind of higher consciousness? Can we reach the absolute states of human possibility and divine consciousness in this lifetime? Of course we can, because I always my personal belief, I don't know what you think about this, Jane, I think the work we do spiritually is done here in this material plane, isn't it, really? The work we do in the spirit world, I think, is more like a resting place. And I think that's why we have to come back here, because this is the place where our spirit is quickened. Because we have all sorts of troubles and sufferings and things. And it's in the times of adversity that we discover who we really are. We discover our mettle, don't we? We discover our strongest points and our weakest. And we need sometimes that adversity. So it's here. Can we reach it while living in this life? That's what this life's about, to attain whatever you mean by ascension, of course. But what I would interpret it as the highest level of divine consciousness. Any thoughts, Jane?
I think you answered it all, Craig. I don't think there's any more I can say. I think you answered that beautifully.
Okay, you take the next question up then.
May I? Jessica. When are we going to see spirituality be more mainstream in the Western world? As a counsellor, it's still taboo to talk about spiritual regarding healing the body. Well, actually, I think there are a lot of people that are coming spiritually aware, and I think we're going to find that more next year, because this year it seems that karmically everything's coming to the surface. Man is always searching. In a way, man's always searching for answers. That's another thing we were talking about on the way up, Craig. So I just feel people will become spiritually aware. Now, what do you define as spiritually? I think spiritually really is being in tune with a higher self. Nature, you don't have to be with any organised religion. Spiritually being a good person and being in tune with nature and each other.
Well, I would actually add, Jessica, when Jane and I started doing our mediumistic work, you couldn't do any spirituality on mainstream television. On broadcast television, you were not allowed to demonstrate mediumship. We got in serious trouble sometimes with the not advertising standards, what would it be? Ofcom. I think it's Ofcom. That might have been something else at the time. You're not allowed to do mediumship. It's necromancy, you know? And there was very, very strong religious reasons, you know, because the moral codes have been developed by the Christian church that thought mediumship was a terrible thing. And we had to keep it pretty secret at the beginning days when I first started doing my mediumship. It was something that you couldn't talk about publicly. So times have changed dramatically.
Please try again.
And what in the hell was that?
Your phone.
My phone's on. Try again. What the hell are you talking about? Interesting. But, you know, if you compare it now to what it was like before, it's massively different. And we were talking in the car on the way up about how groups of people in unexpected walks of life are very interested in spirituality. Like, for example, today I've been talking to some lawyers and police people and things like that. And I was amazed when I said, oh, well, actually, what do you do? Well, actually, I'm a clairvoyant. Oh, are you? That's interesting. I thought once upon a time I'd have been, oh, who's this idiot, you know? So we are in the times of massive changes. In our lifetime, we've seen massive, massive changes. And you know, it was illegal to do mediumship up until, I think it was 1952 or something like that. 53 is when
Helen
Duncan was actually prosecuted for doing mediumship.
Witches Act.
Under the Witches Act, which was repealed by Winston Churchill. It was from that point on that things started to change. And as things become more mainstream, as more of you watch channels like this, and people see that it's not some evil thing, it's something that actually helps people and can be inspiring, the world has changed a lot. So thank you for answering our questions from the car. Because indeed that's what we were talking about. When will it become mainstream? My goodness, it's amazing.
This one, Craig.
Sorry?
You read this one.
You'd like me to read? Hi guys, please advise my daughter is a very good medium, but often ends suffering from depression after some readings. She struggles with this gift and would rather not have it. Right.
Well, I can answer that.
You want to say first bit, Jane?
Yeah. Well, if you are feeling or picking up somebody's vibration, if they've got depression, it's like you need to shut yourself down, your chakras and that, because sometimes you can have people that drain you, or you might have if you have somebody that's got mental illness or anything like that, you shouldn't be doing it for that person, should you, Craig?
No, I think when you're doing mediumship, it can be very draining. Not just physically. I mean, I've been doing an awful lot of readings lately, so I've had to slow down a bit because we seem to be very popular at the moment. But so sometimes you have to think, well, I have to ease off a little bit, you know, people have to wait, because if you overdo it, you physically get exhausted from it. But it also takes a lot from what we call your life force, your prana energy. And although we mediums will use certain techniques to replenish the prana, you know, because I've been trained and Jane's been trained as a medium, so we know what to do about how to replenish our energies, sort of like heal yourself type of things. But for your daughter there, Belladonna, you'll find that she's probably not trained, and it's opening spontaneously. And she would really need to sort of learn a little bit how to shut down. I mean, this I'm pushing my book now. One of my books, Psychic School, if you go and have a look on Amazon, I've written about how to open and close the aura. Now, there's lots of stuff on the web about it, some of which I think is a little bit crackpot. But basically, we have to, when I do mediumship, I open up. When I don't do mediumship, I've closed the aura down and brought it all back into myself, and I'm just ordinary Craig. You know, I couldn't tell you anything about anything, you know. But that's why we kind of have to get into a zone with it. And she needs to learn how to open and close. And if you're based in the UK, go and maybe visit a spiritualist church where they have awareness evenings, where people can sit with a large group of people and learn some of the basics of how to use the mediumistic gift. So there's a start, and that's free, or a few pence, or something like that, not much.
Right, Heather, do you think pendulum works? How much trust do you put into it? Well, if we do police work with pendulums, they usually bring maps. They turn it over the other side, and if I use a pendulum and that energy is actually dropping down, then I'll put a cross on it and where it guides me. Because sometimes the subconscious mind, you're wanting it to give you answers. You've got to clear your mind and trust where that energy goes with the pendulum. It depends who's using it as a tool, doesn't it, Craig?
Yeah, I think with pendulums, the important thing is to remember that it's and with the Ouija board and lots of any devices that you use, it's very much connected to your subconscious,
right,
unconscious mind. So the messages you get are often influenced by your own subconscious hopes, fears, and anything, any good and bad, all of it's there from the unconscious. So we've got to be very, very careful that we're not just tapping the unconscious. So in a way, you've got to be like a medium has to be. A medium has to kind of be a clear channel. You know, the more our thoughts get in the way, the more it messes up the mediumship and you get things wrong. The more I have a personal opinion about something, the more it can get in the way. This happens with all mediums. We've got to try hard to be a clear channel. So the pendulum can work if you're a clear channel. And sometimes things like dowsing, particularly dowsing for water, often people have a sort of a knack for it. And I think it's because they've kind of got in touch with that specialist sort of side of themselves, as it were, that just it has that ability to sort of particularly sense water. But of course you can use a pendulum, like Jane said, you can use it for finding where something is lost, like, you know, where's the body buried, you know, sort of Cluedo type things. You can use the pendulum for diagnostics of, I've seen people use it with various sort of hemispheres that you use with lines on it to sort of say what whether you need this vitamin or that vitamin. And they use it for finding geopathic stress, archaeology, all sorts of things. But it's always tapping the unconscious mind ultimately. It's coming through the unconscious mind, just the same way clairvoyance does. So they work. How they work, I don't know. I mean, it's perhaps slight movements of the hand that are connected with the unconscious, because the unconscious controls, you know, the automatic systems of the body, and maybe those just twitches or something makes it work, and somehow it connects. You're subconsciously moving that pendulum somehow, but not consciously trying to move it. So I put a little bit of trust in it, but I'd rather trust my own clairvoyance. But those that are beginners might find that pendulums is a good way to get tuned in to your natural powers. You know, I've used it in the circles and things like that when I'm teaching people. We've had some very interesting results with pendulums, and it gives people a lot of confidence, particularly when you're learning. And this is the sort of thing, I'll probably bring things like this on my online teaching that I'll be doing in due course through Zoom, which you can have a look on the website for that. Anybody send me an email if you want to become part of those courses later. But, you know, pendulums are an interesting way to, you know, start to actually prove to yourself that these things really do work. And there's loads and loads of techniques.
I think also if you could start off using a crystal pendulum, because the metal ones are quite heavy for females to use. So if you get a rose quartz or a clear quartz, you should use one of those and choose it, and it will take your vibration and it will take your energy, and it will feel right for you. It's like I believe crystals choose us, not the other way around. So what works for you is very important.
Yeah, I suppose crystals are considered as being like amplifiers. Like you use quartz, for example. If you compress quartz, you get a spark. That's how the gas lighters work. So they say that crystals can be an amplification system to help develop your link with the vibrations of things.
Right, Jessica, what's your thoughts about astrological signs? Is there any merit to horoscopes? Well, the best horoscopes or people to deal with that, I would say, would be the Indian astrology. Would you, Craig?
Yeah, I think with astrology, there's astrology and astrology. What you see in the newspapers, in the sun signs, is that was all invented, I think it was in 1930. I can't remember who did it, but one particular paper, one astrologer decided, how about we just sort of compress it all down and say all Aquarians are going to be this, or all Leos are going to be this, and so forth. And they made that's when this, what we call sun sign astrology, came out. So it gave a general setting, a general sort of reading, a daily horoscope or weekly horoscope based on the sun sign. So it's a very new invention. When you think that astrology's been with us right the way back to the Sumerians and the Babylonians, the ancient Greeks, ancient India, ancient China, even the Aborigines, all kind of connected with astrology in different ways. And I think if you want to do a study of astrology, I think you really got to see a very good astrologer. There's a lot of people that offer simple astrology things that are done by computers, which are pretty good, but there's a need also from an astrologer to be able to, you kind of intuitively understand the chart as well, and you need a kind of a very a very broad knowledge, which a computer can't really do. A computer is a yes/no sort of answer sort of thing. But when you see a really good astrologer, and like Jane says, I particularly think that astrology is particularly powerful from the Indian astrologers, and the ones that I met in India could sometimes tell you mind-boggling things. And often the things like the Nadi readings, which we've also got on our website now. Actually, you can get Nadi readings on the website. You have a look at psychics.co.uk up on the screen there. Sometimes they might, if they're giving you a Nadi reading, sometimes look at the astrology to see if they can get confirmation or what. If there's a bit of it, if something's not quite clear, they will often look at the astrology too to see if that can give greater clarification. And when you start using these things with the real trained experts that have gone through generations passing this knowledge down, most of it orally, then it becomes something quite mind-boggling. But the 1930s sun sign astrology and the signs and all that, well, I think that's more of a pinch of salt for a large part of it. It's interesting, it's amusing, but real astrology, something different.
Right, next question. Alex, do you have to reincarnate when you pass over, or can you stay in the spirit world? It depends on your actions from previous lives, what you've done. Not everybody reincarnates, of course, they can't possibly, but it depends what you've done in a previous incarnation. Yeah,
I would say that reincarnation is, I think we have to kind of come back sometimes. I mean, I see I don't see the spirit world as a permanent thing for most of us. I think a point comes when you've done your work in the world, and I think that comes when you've kind of spent your life really, I think ultimately focused on spirituality, because that's what the world's all about, or you focused on perhaps doing some good deeds in this world, because that might have cleared any karma that you needed to clear. And I think sometimes I think all times we go to the spirit world, and then when that kind of good karma, that heavenly bank account's used up, we then are gently brought back to this world again. Not all of a sudden, but as groups, it's kind of the energy's right now that you've got to come back again to learn more lessons. And I think the more spiritually developed one becomes, the more choice you have about what your choice might be of next births. If you've lived a pretty bad life, and this is my thoughts, I can't prove this, but if you lived a bad life, then you're kind of forced into a more difficult situation to make you learn the lessons that you should have learned last time round, until you become a more awake person, a more compassionate person, and a more spiritually minded person. And I think ultimately that's what it's all about, and that's why we come to this earth. But this earth is just one level of many, many levels of existence. I mean, the spirit world is not just the spirit world. It's beyond and beyond and beyond. It's eternal progress open to human soul. There's endless levels in many mansions in the next world, as it says in the Christian Bible. You have many, many levels of existence, and this idea comes also in the Hindu teachings that I talk about, the lokas, the multiple levels, above and below. You know, there's heavier levels and higher levels, but you know, nobody's ever stuck. The progress is always higher and higher towards the truth, towards realization, and towards the bliss of knowledge.
Right.
Done. Answered it all. The meaning
there
of
you
purpose of life.
go, clever
explained.
boy, eh? Right, Maya, what do you think about the many aerial phenomenal sightings around the world? Do you think it is possible that there are alien beings who are sending us, working against us?
Alien beings assisting us and helping us from
Yes.
other planes. Well, I think it would be very narrow-minded of anybody to think that there's not life elsewhere. I mean, as I think Carl Sagan said it, the most terrifying prospect is that this is the only life, that Earth is the only life, and if it was to be gone from Earth, then the universe is just going to go into empty blackness. That's the most terrifying thing. I think there must be other consciousnesses out there. I'm not sure how they could connect with us, you see, because physically the distances between us and even the closest star is phenomenal time and phenomenal distance. We couldn't travel, as far as we know, it's not going to be possible to travel faster than light. Therefore, physically, it's going to be pretty much impossible in any civilization's lifetime to connect with each other. Is it possible we understand people are watching us tonight? I expect most of you accept that there's telepathy. I mean, if we're mediums, we're telepathically communicating with the spirit world. And I suppose it's quite possible to connect with other alien beings. I've not actually seen anything that I've seen that's convincing for that, though.
I thought you were an alien. David Icke said you were a lizard.
Yeah, but I've not seen anything. You see, I've seen nutcases talking,
Soldiers.
talking from, I'm coming from this Mars, with all sorts of stupid voices and things, and I think, oh my God, and people are listening and going, oh, this is amazing, I think I've got this girl's going is a crackpot, you know. So, and unfortunately, I've seen all the wrong stuff, just like I've often seen bonkers trance stuff, which has put me off with no evidence whatsoever, and it worries me. So, but I'm not pushing saying that it's not possible. But it strikes me, I don't think we've had anything given through mediumship that I could say is proof. You know, if an alien was to communicate with us through, say, mediumship, they would probably have to give us something in mathematics, the sort of thing that most mediums wouldn't know about,
Quantum
that could
physics.
give some proof, something, say, mathematical, something from physics that we could say, there's no one on Earth knows that. That's that sort of thing. I don't know whether that's quite right, but not the sort of messages, we're here to help you and we're all here. I don't really hold with that. Unless these spirit people and these aliens are perhaps the spirit guides. Or maybe even some of the people that walk this earth are people from other dimensions. Because maybe there's another way to travel, maybe there's an interdimensional way to travel, but this is mere guesswork I'm saying here. But there's certainly a lot of interesting things I saw in the Nadis, where there's references to people that were snakes and the Naga. And I think there's a lot of room for exploration in the history of spirituality. And I don't want to get carried away with what David Icke says, because I think some of he's watched too much V on television, if you ask me. And I know a lot of your followers are David Icke, and he's a nice guy. I met him once, and I thought a very nice person. I don't want to knock him, but I mean, I think he's got carried away with it. But I think there was, if we could kind of push some of the overthinking out of the way, I think there was some connection with something that may have been kind of snake-like, because there seems to be references of that seem to be real references that mankind at some point may have had a connection. But we're talking alien and we're talking all sorts of stuff, and the problem is everybody wants to be the sleuth about this and think about it, and we all get a little bit over carried away, I think, sometimes with the fantasy, and a lot of people manipulate this thirst for this and come up with a bit of crackpot ideas.
And the next
I'd
one.
like to see a clearer general thought about it.
Next question, Craig. You're going on a bit. It's the same girl, is it, Jessica?
This is answers a good question. So
A psychic
on,
once
Jessica.
told me that animals such as dogs can't come back, being reincarnated into humans. What's your guys' thoughts on it? Well, I know that the Chinese believe sometimes with their horoscopes, they say, oh, I hope my sister come back as a pig, because they believe that, the Chinese, very much so.
I remember someone saying that.
Yeah, and but animals have souls, animals have spirits. So an animal, I believe, would come back to somebody that really loved them unconditionally. But I don't feel that animal reincarnate into a human. Animals, I believe, do come back to loved ones and might show themselves for a few seconds or that. And so that, you know, that loved one, there's famous dogs, aren't there, that's sitting on graves that you see that want to connect with the humans. But I couldn't say an animal could reincarnate into a human.
Well, actually, I'd probably think differently to that, actually, Jane. The ancient Greeks used to think about a thing called metempsychosis, which is that they believed that people start in animal form and reincarnate into higher forms. So you start off as a low animal form, such as an amoeba or something, and you gradually work your way up the chain until you might become a horse, a cow, a monkey, a human being. And that we actually go through this cycle of gradually developing into human form, and that human birth, and the Buddhists believe much the same, that human birth is a very rare thing, and that we might have many births as insects, for example, because there's many billions of insects in the world. It would account for why there's so many souls in the world, and we're always evolving gradually until we get the opportunity to being a human. And when you think about it, what's so special about us humans to say that we are the only conscious beings or valuable beings in the world, really? I mean, who's to say, you know, we're all part of the same life force. Animals, dogs, the rest of it are all part of the human form. I think it would be very unusual for a dog to jump from dog form to human form, but in the next incarnation. But who knows? I mean, you look at some people and you look in their faces and often you see animals there, don't you? You see, like, you know, you kind of say that person looks a bit like, he's got a bit of a face looks like a fish, or that person looks a bit like a cow, or that person with a long face looks a horse.
But that's being facetious, though,
No,
Craig,
it's true,
isn't
though,
it?
but you do. I think you do
But
see a little bit of reflection of it.
It might be people have got evolution of being confused when, you know, you go back to the caveman time, and they all felt we come from apes and different things, and man grew. That might have come from that period.
Well, our bodies come from an evolution of from a monkey-like state, or God knows what was before that. So I even think the earliest humans were sort of a pig-like creature. So that happens physically. Why not spiritually too? I think it's arrogant of us to think only humans can become enlightened. And supposing you took a spirit form and you came back in an animal form, but you know, who knows what that animal's thinking? Could it be that soaring eagle in the sky is actually some enlightened being looking down on us? You know, we don't know. We can only speculate. We can't answer that question for certain. But it's an interesting thought, and thank you for that.
Right, you read this, Nana.
Sorry, Jane?
You can read.
You
Nana.
want me to read it? Okay. Do we have soul names that are different from earthly given ones when we go back to the spirit world? Do you want to say that?
I believe we do, because when I've done naming services in a spiritualist church, you might have a spirit guide that brings back a name for a child. Could be water lily, or it can be a very unique spiritual name. And I believe that from going back to the spirit world, they have all these different names. So yes, you know, you could have an ordinary name here, and then sometimes you could go and visit a place and suddenly you think, why am I attracted to that Chinese person, a culture, and it feels right? Would you agree? Sounds a bit mixed matching what I'm saying.
I've got a cough tonight, I'm tired. I remember reading. I'm a great fan of Carl Jung, the psychologist Carl Jung, a brilliant man. You must read his books. But he wrote in his autobiography, Memories, Dreams, Reflections, when he was most of the last part when he was dying, he had some incredible kind of out-of-body experiences and things that he wrote about. And one of the things, he saw his surgeon come to him, and he spoke about his surgeon. He's seeing his surgeon in his primal form. He said he saw his surgeon dressed as a priest of Kos, Kos from Crete, and he said that it was his primal form. So it makes me wonder that each of us might have what I think Jung expressed nicely there as calling our primal form. So maybe when we go to the spirit world, each of us, just like we have spirit guides that come to us like as, Indians or whatever, maybe each of us has a kind of primal form that we go back to, that what we feel comfortable with, what was our culturally, while we were on earth, was most influential to us. So if we've got a primal form, we might even have a spirit name. But I think sometimes when those names are given by other mediums and things, I wonder whether they sometimes are coming from fantasy or whether the medium's really getting that. I mean, my spirit name, my primal form name, as it were, was given to me by the Nadis, and so that's what I take as my primal name. But who knows? It's difficult to know.
And what does Sharavana call me, Craig?
Shakti. She calls me Shiva.
Shakti.
There's Shiva, where's Shakti? I think it's quite nice. I think it's quite nice he said that, actually.
Right, KK. I've met a number of people who claim to communicate with, what's that, Craig?
Siddha or Nagas or deities. Do you have beliefs about psychic connections with such various beings? So people watching, Siddhas are sort of like the Siddha yogis, the higher Siddha beings like Agastya and all the rishis of old. The Nagas are like the snake-like air kingdoms. The deities, of course, would be like the gods. And I suppose, really, okay, we get a lot of cultural. We're talking here about the many gods of Hinduism, really, and I think, just as the spirit guides, are there not also perhaps gods? People who have evolved to a level of consciousness that they've gone beyond human form, and they've become super beings. The super Ubermensch of Nietzsche, perhaps. The idea that perhaps some people have evolved or become like godlike creatures, the same as angels. So, and all the different belief systems of the world have kind of made them into the form that is acceptable to us. So, in the West we kind of see it as angelic people or saints, perhaps. In India they say there's almost as many gods as people, because everybody creates a form. And I'm sure that some of those forms become a reality. When people worship Shiva, for example, it becomes an actual person as visualized. Even Ganesha with the elephant head becomes a real being, because there's this idea that we can create like a mind form that takes on an energy of its own, and ultimately, since we're looking at it with the divinity as a divinity, it takes on an aspect of the divinity of the one God. So in my understanding, there's one God, God being a word that is very, very difficult to understand because it means so many different things to so many people. So I would think one divinity is a better word, that manifests in different forms for different people in different cultures in different ways for different tasks. And I suppose ultimately we've got to go beyond all that and have direct realization of what we could call the Godhead, and the realization that we are also that Godhead and all is one. There we go. Answered the questions of the universe and everything again.
Right. Jessica, what are the merits of birth charts? Could Chinese astrology be as accurate as Indian astrology? Well, I think both are quite good in their own way, don't you? The Chinese and Indian astrology. I find the Indian astrology fascinating, and I find the Chinese astrology fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on your birth, sun rising and sunset. Very important, that, Craig.
Yeah, the Western astrology takes the sun as the central body of the universe. of the astrology charts. India takes the moon as the central basis of the charts. I'm not so sure about Chinese. I think China, you could say, takes the stars as the central thing. They all kind of come at it in a slightly different way. Now, I don't have a lot of understanding of the depths of Chinese astrology, but it's been there for centuries, and it's referenced in the most ancient books. But the Cultural Revolution damaged a lot of it, and you've still got a little bit of Chinese astrology left in Hong Kong and Taiwan on those little last parts left. But so much of Chinese astrology got damaged. I think, again, it's all valid. And I think we can learn from each other now that we have this world where we can connect through the internet and YouTube and the rest. And we can learn from all of them. And, perhaps it just depends what your preference is. Wouldn't you say, Jane?
Absolutely. What's the next question now? What's that?
Runes. What do you think of runes, Jane? Are they reliable?
I think runes are very good stones. Once again, we've got symbols, haven't we, on runes, and you get some very good readers that can read the runes. I remember somebody gave me a rune stone as a sign of the sun that brought a lot of happiness. I wanted it, and I've still got it, actually. I think they're quite good, long as they're used in truth, not in fantasy.
Yeah, my opinion is it's nothing to do with whether it's runes, tarot, whatever. It's the reader, isn't it? It's like, so they're all tools, these things. You can say it's not the saw or the hammer or the screwdriver that's the best tool. It's the carpenter, and it's the same thing with all these things, because you could use any of these things, but they should really just be sounding boards for clairvoyance.
Well, I believe there was somebody doing predictions with asparagus, Craig.
Oh, yeah, wasn't there? There was asparagus all over the press recently.
But they make these predictions after they've already been told.
Yes, and I remember that woman on Something Strange, that television programme we do, who used to read pubic hair.
Oh, ghastly.
Yeah. Yes, well, I suppose it's the reader that counts, and I think I would have probably discounted her quite a lot as a reader if she wanted to use such silly techniques. But you can read everything. I used to know one medium, psychic, that used to read the dirty plates. Like we can read tea leaves and things. You read the dirty plates, and if he gave a bad reading, you'd have to do the washing up. But you can read everything. Anything can be a sounding board for clairvoyance. Even a Rorschach ink blot. Which I've written about in some of my books, can often be a thing where you look for the images, look for the pictures, interpret them, and then, most importantly, step on and use your clairvoyance. Again, I'll bring those type of techniques into some of the teachings I'll be doing later on Zoom on the site. Okay, shall I read it, Jane?
Mm-hmm.
If we have free will and choices in life, then surely there must be more than one outcome in any situation. And can psychics see the different pathway outcomes? Elbow cough, elbow cough.
Well, I think you have to use your own free will. It doesn't matter going to psychics, clairvoyants, mystics, seers, sages. There's a part when we're born, we know right from wrong as we grow. A psychic can guide you, and I feel you've got to find your own psychic, and I feel they've got to prove themselves to you, that everything they tell you comes to fruition, shall we say.
I the way I describe it is, I think what we do as psychics and mediums and the rest of them, we're trying to foresee ahead. We see the current trajectory. So if you're carrying on and the way you're carrying on, this is going to be the likely outcome. However, if you change your attitudes, then that outcome might change. But that outcome might still be there. It might be hard to avoid because it's somehow there in your fate. But we have free will. Another way of describing it, I think, is to say that perhaps we see the lay of the land. We see the map. And we can perhaps guide you the route over that map. And that's where your free will comes in. Or another way I quite often describe it in my readings is I say, what I'm seeing is the spiritual weather ahead. And I'm going to tell you whether you need an umbrella
and let's
or
hope
not.
there's no storms with that,
That's
Craig.
what I mean. You can see the good and the bad, and whether things are going to open up now.
Yeah.
And of course, whether it's raining or sunshine or rain, it doesn't matter. We just have to take a different attitude because the journey's still the same. But it's just how we adapt, and that's what it's all about, isn't it? Life is about adaptation. That's what survival is, both evolutionarily and also spiritually.
The one who seeks finds, Craig. Was watching Jeffrey Dahmer on Netflix. Are serial killers self-created or spiritually bound? Well, I think once again, I've often questioned and very interested in serial killers, because I used to be a psychiatric nurse, as you know. What is it, a gene that when people thought it's a gene they've got in them, is there a gene for good behaviour, Craig? Is there a gene for bad behaviour? I think it's something where their emotions are quite mixed up inside, and it's as if very insecure people. I think with that Jeffrey Dahmer, he was gay and he used to take men back, drug them, Craig, and then cut them all up, because he felt that he was lonely, and he used to hide them in the closet and all different things, and he was very interested in the occult, and it sort of dark forces around him, and he must have been looking for power, some kind of power. It's an empowerment to do that. I mean, you get some serial killers that have been family minded. I can think of one we saw once. There's a little boy used to throw kittens on fires, and then he used to, if anybody looked at him, he used to shoot them. And then the mafia used to employ him, I believe. Do you know what I'm talking about, Craig?
Yeah, I remember, yeah.
And then he put this man down this cave and got rats to eat him. And when he actually went to court, his daughter couldn't believe this was her father and what she was hearing. And I think the barrister turned around and said, "Do you get off with doing this?" And that, no. And he was so upset to see his daughter crying. And this was a serious serial killer that had no morals, nothing. If somebody looked at him, he would shoot them, and he just got joy out of killing. And I think a lot of these people, it's all about empowerment, and it's all about power. And once they start shooting one person or murdering another person, then it becomes a way of life for them. What do you think, Craig?
Well, I think you're right. I think a lot of the main problems with people in life that give us trouble are people who are control freaks. They've got to control everything out of fear, usually. There's something in them that frightens them, and then they have to control their environment around them, and they end up trying to control everybody else. And then it gets out of hand, and it can turn into all sorts of twisted and mixed up stuff. So what you're saying there is that in some respects they're self-created, because they're creating that energy around them. But then obviously if we believe, like we've been talking here tonight, that we bring forward things from previous reincarnations, for example, then we must also bring things into this world from previous lives that are kind of pushing us on a negative path of some sort. There's a couple of things that kind of might be interested, anybody's interested in this, further research. I've got a book at home, I don't know where it is, I haven't seen it for a while, but it's an old book from way back from the 1930s about the criminal hand, about palmistry, and how certain markings are very, very common on people who have committed serial killings and terrible crimes and murders. And there seems to be something about certain markings on the hand that seem to point out murderers, which would be quite interesting. I mean, I think it would be a bit dodgy sort of convicting someone based upon their hand, but that's something interesting which could suggest, if you accept and believe in palmistry, that perhaps there's some mark of Cain on your hand that could tell you something. I'm going to hold my hand and hide my hand just in case there's anything incriminating. And I would also, if anybody wants to follow this up, Colin Wilson, who I really love as a writer, who wrote the book like The Occult and various other ones. He was very interested in the criminal mind and how it worked. And he's a very, very, very interesting person to read if you want to explore this idea a little bit further. But you know, I think don't you think though also we have a bit of an obsession with serial killers too much, that these people are, you know, everything you see on Netflix lately, it seems to be about cocaine dealing, or it seems to be about monstrous minded people. And I think it's kind of a cheap way of writing stories. I want to see something a bit more imaginative rather than always this shock horror story programs on telly. But anyway, that's one of my opinions. I think the media plays the lowest in us all the time. Go on, Jane, your turn. I've been talking
thank
too
you,
long.
Craig. Is it possible to interact and play with angels? I'm sure I did before I started school. Now, Nana, because her daughter comes to me, Katie, I believe there are angels, and I believe children, because their perceptions are so pure, but it's not like angels with great big giant wings. It's like beams of light, Craig, and I believe children do see those things.
Yeah, I think what we're talking about is spirits. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, if you accept that life goes on, and you accept that there's a spirit world, and you accept that the spirit world can communicate with us, I think when we're children, we're kind of more open, aren't we? I think when we become adults, we get kind of lost in the world. You know, for example, we can be moments where we can be really awake and talking about amazing things and thinking about the greater picture of the world and the meaning and purpose of life, and then next day we're back in the same old sleepwalk, and we're in the same blinkered view of the world, and we've lost it again, and we've fallen back into the illusion. But children are kind of still in that innocence, and maybe children, for some reason, because they're not sort of blinkered by logic like we are, maybe they just have a greater perception of the next world and see things.
Well, they're pure, aren't they?
Yeah,
children?
they're pure. And just while we're still chatting, folks, if you please support this channel, don't forget, you know, if you become a patron, if you have a look in the description below, in the description, you can become a patron and support this channel. I keep on about you to help us, but you know, this studio here is all supported by donations. It's quite expensive because we have to leave it set up all the time. It allows us to be able to do these Friday night shows easily. It allows us to be able to plan things like the special Halloween one we're going to do and things like that. Jane and I give all our time for this, so we enjoy it, mind you. We do it anyway, but your support, your help helps us tremendously. Even if you just do a little $3 patron once a month, it's peanuts.
Can I just say, Craig?
Peanuts.
Can I also say, Craig, if you're very rich, get your checkbook out and start writing, because we want all these things done now while we're still here on the earth plane. We can't be doing things over there when we're called up above. So please be generous, because people that are being given money, I believe you're given money to help others less fortunate, and you can do good things, and you're gathering good karma by doing that as well. And Craig hasn't mentioned, but I will. I also have my channel, Jane Hamilton Parker. Do come in on that. Every now and again I feel inspired and do talks and that. And the next one I'm going to do is about royal hands, what I pick up and what I see. So you might be interested in that. And so I'll try and get that out next week. And I'm going to observe the royal hands and tell you what I pick up.
Yeah, that's quite a good idea for a theme. Great idea for a theme. I like that. And like I say as well, you know, Jane says get your checkbooks out. You know, we're trying to set up a spiritual centre. If you believe in me and Jane and what we're trying to do, we want to try to get a beautiful spiritual centre where we can sort of open this up to people being able to come and visit and have we want to do it in our lifetimes. You know, we might be able to do something perhaps later on with the lottery fund or something, but we need to get the thing moving. And we've got some lovely people that have helped tremendously. But, you know, I know that many of you that come to see me as a medium and had readings with me, I know when we're talking about, oh, you've got to do a $50 million here investment and a $50 million investment there, some of you have quite big checkbooks.
Well, invest
so
in
invest in your good karma for the future. When you give, it clears the path of your karma. And let's face it, we want to just use this to make a happy world and spread the lovely message of spirituality and the collectiveness that all these religions, all are one. It's all one spiritual family, and that humanity is one spiritual family with one spiritual divinity behind it all, expressing itself in many, many forms. And we'd like to be able to help spread that message. Perhaps you can help us. Questions then, I guess.
Squeaky voice.
Can a house feel soulless? Been in mine 22 years and it's never felt like
Well,
home.
there's an easy solution to that, Cat. Move! That's what because you know, we can walk into a property and it feels like it's hugging us, or and it feels so nice energy. I mean, this feels nice energy, but obviously you might have been picking up the vibration from the people that previously were there, and perhaps you don't feel comfortable in that house. So you can change it. Only you can do that.
Yeah, and another interesting concept too is that, yes, it, like Jane says, it picks up the energy of the people that have been there, and it can, and a place can become kind of negative energy. And I think sometimes the actual place itself can pick up, like what they used to call sick building syndrome. You know, like if it might be positioned like by big power lines. They know nowadays that power lines can make people in the houses below feel very depressed. But some people say that there's a thing called geopathic energy, geopathic stress, that underground water, for example, and certain fissures in the earth and things like, because the earth's a huge, great moving piece of quartz, isn't it, mainly? Most of the earth is made of quartz. All of that's moving around. And we know that some places can be very spiritually charged. Like Jane and I went to Avebury Ring at the weekend. Fabulous energy from the past, and the people that there must have known something about the energy of that place, because it's still there, a bit like Stonehenge but bigger. Avebury Ring is. So there's positive energy places, and then you find other places that seem to have a sort of a dead energy to them, and maybe it's something to do with something physical with the earth, or even it's something about it. But if it's wrong, and it's not easy to say, it's easy to say move, but I mean it's not always easy to do, but I think it is good. Where you live is very important. I think even certain places in a room might become your personal power spot too, you know. Like, you know, the certain area of a place, like when I do my meditation in my meditation room, a certain place always feels the right place to meditate. If I move to sit somewhere else in the room, that's wrong, you know. And it's just that you find your personal spot, and it becomes that becomes a power spot for you as well.
Right. Annabella. Hello, Craig and Jane. My 6-year-old daughter told me recently that she has been seeing 2 baby angels living in our house since she was little. Can we move house if this is the case? Thank you. Why would she want to move house, Craig?
Well, it sounds quite nice, doesn't it?
I would stay there.
2 baby angels living in our house. And like we say, children do pick up things. And I don't necessarily think that spirit things like this are necessarily based upon the house, actually, because we were talking there about some houses don't feel right, and I think when people talk about haunted houses, it's more like recordings that have been left in the atmosphere as opposed to actual spirits floating around. And that child might be in touch with their own spirit guides. 6 years old, you know, she could perhaps be sensing things. And so I think that I don't think it's a reason to move house from the sounds of it. You know, I think it's always good to move and get to a place you feel happy with. You know, because certain place, I think when people choose a home to buy, it's got to feel right, hasn't it? It's not. It might be just right on one level, but it don't feel right. You know, so I think there's a lot of intuition linked with the idea of where we live, and perhaps it's one of our ancient sixth sense from the times before language. You know, we knew certain spots were right, and our gut feeling knew that was a protected place.
And I feel that your daughter is quite a gifted child, because she can pick up vibration and she can sense things in the atmosphere, and she's quite safe. There's nothing bad around her or around your house. In fact, I feel it's the beauty and the light, and I feel you're very blessed from the great divine with that. Right, Alex, can you become a spirit guide? And the answer to that is yes, in the future, because I believe, like for example, Craig, Dr. Christian Bernard was a great heart surgeon, South African, that was the first one to do heart transplants. So he passed into spirit, and a heart surgeon here, just say Great Ormond Street or Southampton University Hospital, he would guide that cardiologist or that surgeon and help them with that, because every action what you do on the earth is accountable for. So if you do bad things, you've got to come back again and you've got to correct it. If you do good things, you gather in good karma. And I think the best thing, it doesn't matter how rich you are or what kind of house you live in, it's what's in your heart that's important, and to reach out to help others. So all different, your spirit guides will change from conception onwards. I can remember once when I was a nurse, I was going on a ward and there's this charge, and I said, oh, I see you've got your Zulu guide here. You've got a witch doctor can throw bones and tell the fortune. And it was so wonderful to see another person that was exactly like myself, interested in psychic things and being psychic. It was like coming out of a spiritual closet, Craig. And you know, and it was really, really fascinating, because as Craig said earlier, we were very careful who we spoke to, because a lot of people, not just Pahuit, were frightened, or people thought that, oh, you must be in an occult or things, didn't they, Craig?
Yeah, it was pretty hard in the just to go back to the question again there as well, because I think, you know, spirit guides, it sounds like spirit gurus really. People think of it that it's something that you're, you know, they're going to teach you, and that you're going to be all these sort of messages from the spirit guides. I found that some of the people that I've known in life definitely do come to me when I'm doing mediumship. My auntie Marion, for example, I've often felt around me. She was very, very interested in mediumship, and even sat in my circle for a long time. And I felt her close to me. And some of those watching this channel might remember my website when we used to have the chat rooms at Delphi years ago, and we had, you know, we used to have thousands of people coming into the chat rooms, and one of my helpers there was Vi Kipling. She definitely comes around me sometimes and helps me with the mediumship, and it's amazing. I can sense her around me, along with many, many others, all helping out in some way. And so I think a lot of the people you've cared for in life and loved in life and friends within life come close, as well as, I think, you know, higher guides that you've not met in this life. So, you know, in order to sort of, particularly with a public event, you've got to have a hell of a lot of people organising it all on the spirit side to help the messages get through, help you with your communication, and help the spirits themselves come forward, because they need explaining too, because the spirit world, the people coming from the spirit world don't know how to do the communication. They're just as stumped as we are here. They have to be shown, look, show them a picture, or give a link to a memory he knows or something. They're being shown how to help with the communication too. So many people will join us in this incredible afterlife experience, and the thing that happens with it all.
One more question.
I think we'll have to make the last question now, Jane, because we're coming towards the end. And don't forget, I'll just say again, do become a patron. Have a look in the description below when this whole video is finished, and consider becoming a patron and helping to keep this channel going well and expanding and becoming more and more interesting, and with our equipment and everything like that, and our place. And we'd like to get somewhere permanent, something that can become a spiritual centre where people like you can come and visit.
And if you're very, very good, you might get a cup of tea. Right, Chaz says, can you completely clear your karma? Well, by doing good actions while you're here. It's like if you see a homeless person, don't walk past them, even if you bought them a coffee or a sandwich. You can give to the poor and help those that are really in need, that generally in need, to clear your karma. The karma is all that we all go through and what we've done in previous lives. You can clear your karma by doing good actions. Some people might go to a temple, might give to a priest, or they might buy a cow, or they might feed poor children in India and places like that. But it depends on your incarnation. Do good things always, help others, have compassion, be wise, but don't be a fool at the same time.
And I would just add to that, actually, Ches, to say that when you're saying, can you completely clear your karma, karma's not a bad thing, you know. Karma's good and bad. Karma's the fuel that moves us forward. You know, karma is the thing that is pushing us to greater awareness. I think a point comes where our karma is such that we no longer need to take earthly incarnation, but at the same time, the ultimate clearing of karma, when karma is completely gone, then there is perhaps what can I say, the stillness, the energy has stopped, and you've entered the final possible states of being, which could be, we don't know the answer of the final states of existence, but it could be the enlightenment, the oneness with the universe, the dissolving of self, the dissolving of identity. Perhaps we don't know the answer to that until we get there. But I think karma ultimately is the driving force. But we can certainly, as Jane explained there, we can clear negative karma, we can clear the effects of negative karma that have been released into this world by thinking good, acting good, being good. And by good we mean doing compassionate things, living a loving life, living a happy life, because happiness is another thing that helps to make the world a better place, both for you and all those around you. Being a person that can forgive, because we're all surrounded by such negativity all the time and negative things. And lots of things you can do, like Jane said, like feeding people can be a very powerful thing. That's giving people life force, you know, and it's very, very powerful, particularly if you help people who are in desperate situations. Because all of us that can afford to have a screen in front of us to be able to watch this YouTube are all kind of very, very lucky, you know. There's many, many people in the world who have none of these things that we all take for granted in this life. And I think we're going to see many, many difficult times ahead, you know, in coming years. I'm not saying this is necessarily psychic thing. This is just something that common sense tells us. When there's worldwide inflation, a lot of people are going to suffer. So these are times when we all need to think, you know, about being much more charitable to one another, both being loving, kind, and also trying to do something physically to help the world as well. And then I think we can make the world a better place, don't you think, Jim?
Absolutely.
Well, I think we're going to be coming to the end now, because yes, we've gone past our 8 o'clock end. So thank you for you all for joining. We'll say a few final sort of goodbyes to everybody as we gradually come to a close. So we'll just say a few thank yous as I quietly go quiet so Jane can say...
Oh, thank you, Craig.
Read the screen.
Kay said, always enjoy your talks. Thank you both. Thank you for joining us.
And Lisa's saying, great show as always. Good night, everybody. Thank you, Lisa, for coming and joining us.
I think Lisa's got booked up a reading with me, Lisa.
Oh, you know a lot of these people, don't you? All these hundreds of thousands of people follow us. You know a lot of them.
Yes.
You know everybody, Jane. We can't go anywhere without you knowing someone.
Steve, glad to caught you tonight. Great as always. Thank you,
Thanks
Steve.
for joining us, Steve. Thanks for all of you coming. I've noticed a lot of patron names coming up here too from people.
Good.
Again, I really appreciate you with all what you've been doing and helping us, and the fun stuff we've
Maya,
been doing on Zoom.
thank you, Maya.
Thank you for joining us this evening. Thank you,
Valerie.
Craig and Jane.
Thank you,
Valerie
Craig and
Prakash.
Jane. Thank you.
So you can come in on Facebook, you see, as well as you can come on YouTube. So don't forget, look at both
Alex,
of our channels.
thanks for answering my questions. God bless. God bless you.
I'd like to also say thank you for Matt, who's been coming in and helping us
Oh
get
yeah,
this
we
all
couldn't have
working
done
again.
it without him.
We're all back in business.
Yeah.
Thank you for another interesting chat, says Belinda.
Thank you, Belinda. Chaz, thank you. Oh,
And thanks for your
you're
questions,
from the
actually.
heart.
It's always
Thank
good
you.
when you guys come up with some very interesting questions.
Yeah, it's
you know?
lovely. Enjoy
and
it.
It's good. You thoughtful, interesting, and makes it interesting for all of us. Makes it an interesting evening for us, and I know, you know, it makes an interesting evening for you. So we're going to say goodbye now, I think, aren't we, Jane?
Yes.
So we're going to say good evening. Thank you for joining us. See you soon. Bye for now.
Bye.